This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
We turn now to the controversial natural gas drilling process known as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Fracking injects millions of gallons of water, sand, and chemicals deep into the earth in order to break up shale rock and release natural gas. Supporters say fracking is essential to U.S. energy independence, a way to revitalize depressed rural areas with new mining jobs and gas projects. But opponents warn that hundreds of millions of gallons of chemically treated water used in the process will pollute drinking water supplies and contaminate agricultural fields. These tensions are explored in a new Hollywood film called Promised Land, starring Matt Damon and John Krasinski. It tells the fictional story of an industry insider who visits rural Pennsylvania to convince locals to lease their farmland. However, he ends up sympathizing with those in the community who value land, water, and tradition more than wealth. This is a clip from the film's trailer.
I grew up in a large farming community. Tractor pulls, cow tipping. We had a caterpillar plant. My junior year, they closed it down. And that whole farming town fantasy was just shattered. I'm selling them the only way they have to get back.
I am happy to announce we will be bringing natural gas to McKinley.
I can't believe this is right outside the city. It looks like Kentucky.
2 hours outside any city looks like Kentucky. Are you the owner of this place?
No.
Well, how come you're doing all the work?
You sign this lease, it gives us the right to drill on your land.
A whole lot of money down there.
That is true.
How much do you think?
There's no reason your town shouldn't have a state-of-the-art high school.
What kind of money are you talking about?
You could be a millionaire.
That was a clip of the trailer for the new film Promised Land. Well, the controversial use of fracking that's behind the country's natural gas boom has met stiff resistance here in New York State, where there's been a moratorium against the process. But that moratorium can soon expire. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has until February 27th to make a decision. He's previously promised not to lift the moratorium until research proves fracking can be done safely. Thousands are expected to protest next Wednesday at Cuomo's State of the State address, calling on him to keep the moratorium in place. That's in part because the areas where fracking would occur could impact the water supply for the millions of people living in New York City. Now, a leaked analysis by the state's health department concludes the much-debated drilling technology could be conducted safely. To dive into this firestorm of debate today, we host a roundtable discussion with two supporters of fracking, two opponents. Here in New York, we're joined by Kate Hudson. She's the Watershed Program Director at Riverkeeper, New York's clean water advocate, and Fela McAleer, a filmmaker who did the pro-fracking documentary called Frack Nation, which portrays fracking in a positive light. In Washington, D.C., we're joined by Daniel Simmons, Director of State of Regulatory Affairs at the Institute for Energy Research. And via Democracy Now! Video stream, we're joined by Mayor Matt Ryan of Binghamton here in New York State. He's a former professor of environmental law, outspoken opponent of fracking. Mayor Ryan, why don't we go to you first in Binghamton? You'll be at this protest at the State of the State address of Governor Cuomo. Why? How does fracking affect Binghamton, upstate New York?
Well, thank you for having us today, Amy. And basically how this affects upstate New York is that we know from the narrative that Under the Surface, a great book by Tom Wilbur, really tells us the story of this industry. It just came out, and he's really detailed that we really are in the middle of an industry in its infancy, that we are guinea pigs for this industry, and we are refusing, myself and 500 other elected bipartisan officials, to be part of an experiment for the oil and gas industry. There is absolutely no definitive epidemiological studies concerning this industry. We are not going to allow our water, our air, our people to be exposed to this industry without these kinds of things being in place. And right now, the health impact part of this almost seems like an afterthought. We see that they're somehow saying that nobody's going to be exposed to these chemicals or anything to do with the industry. It's going to be so clean in New York. It's just a pipe dream. This industry is a dirty industry. It's never done in this any place in a clean manner, and there is no rush to do this. There's no rush to go forward. The price of gas is so low right now. T-Bone Pickens, the old architect of this whole thing, has said we shouldn't be drilling any more gas right now. So let's slow down. Let's do it right. Let's make sure that we have, the governor has promised us transparency and openness about this process, and there's been absolutely no transparency and openness as far as the health impacts of this. We don't know what they're reviewing. There's been no public hearing on this. And we're telling the governor if he wants to be head of the most progressive state in the country, which he always talks about, then open and transparency is an important part. And our national energy policy is also very important.
Well, Dan Simmons of the Institute for Energy Research, what about those claims of the mayor, dirty industry, using the people of New York State as guinea pigs? Your response?
My response is that where's the evidence of this? America has the our air quality today is as clean as it ever has been. On hydraulic fracturing, it's been used for over 60 years in more than 1.2 million wells. It's going on just across the border in Pennsylvania. If these health impacts are as bad as the mayor suggests, they should be readily apparent in Pennsylvania. They should be readily apparent in North Dakota. They should be readily apparent in Texas. The reality is that hydraulic fracturing, there's no evidence that it has ever contaminated groundwater. That hydraulic fracturing has enabled the United States to produce a lot more energy at home. As the mayor noted, that means we have very low natural gas prices. That's a great thing because energy makes us all richer. Last night, my wife and I just paid our natural gas bill for the month. It wasn't super cheap, but it wasn't also that expensive, and it allows us to have money to spend on other things that we'd rather spend money on rather than having to suffer in energy poverty. So natural gas has enabled the United States to be the world's largest producer of natural gas. I think that's a good thing, and so far the environmental track record of hydraulic fracturing has been very good.
Kate Hudson, then of Riverkeeper here in New York State, then what's the problem? What is the evidence that there is a problem with fracking?
Well, I think one of the problems is who has the responsibility to come up with evidence. And every day there is more evidence of the negative, adverse environmental impacts of hydrofracking. Every day that going forward in New York is postponed, there is more evidence on the table. The latest.
Can you explain what it is? We should have started there.
Okay. I don't think there's much debate about the fact that high-volume hydraulic fracturing, which has only been going on for 7 or 8 years, is an extremely industrial activity. It is thousands of trucks bringing onto a cleared site thousands of gallons, millions of gallons of water, thousands of gallons of chemicals and sand and explosives, and drilling down a mile or more and then horizontally and then fracturing the tight shale in which the gas exists, and then allowing millions of gallons of water that has been contaminated to come back up. And it is not necessarily what happens underground that is the biggest source of problems in terms of impacts, environmental impacts, health impacts. It's what happens at the surface. There are spills, there are releases of noxious fumes, there are traffic accidents, there is destruction of local roads. I could go on. And the stories that are from individual families and communities about the impacts that this has had are replete. For the last 5 years, we've heard from Texas, we've heard from Colorado, we've heard the ozone levels in underpopulated areas of Wyoming, and we have heard about the spills and explosions and the contamination of drinking water with methane in Pennsylvania. So to say that there is not evidence of a problem, I agree with Matt Ryan that this is an uncontrolled experiment. The industry is figuring it out as they go along, and that is at the expense of communities and their health.
Well, Philip McAleer, you've been a critic of the critics and raised that alarms and questions about first the documentary Gasland and now the new Matt Damon film, and you're producing your own film in support of fracking.
Yeah. Frack Nation, which comes out on Access TV on January 22nd. I mean, I'm from Ireland, but I've been here studying this for 18 months, intense study for the documentary. I think really what you've got here is, it seems to be, is progressives who don't believe in progress. Really, a lot of it's anti-change, anti-modernity. They're worried about this new thing that's coming to New York, this new thing that's coming to Pennsylvania. You hear Kate here, the traffic. I have found in America that progressives are very conservative. They don't like change. They seem to not like modernity, and I think that's what at the back of it. There are lots of stories. She said, yes, we hear stories from individual families, but when those stories are investigated by rigorous science and rigorous investigations, the evidence just fades away. There's no epidemiological study that shows water has been contaminated. The Dimmock case just collapsed. The families invited the EPA in to analyse their water, and the EPA said the water is safe. That's the facts, that's the science. And I suppose it's difficult. People don't like change, but I mean, people have never liked change. Conservative people have never liked change, and I suppose Kate and Mayor Ryan are the true conservatives in this argument.
Mayor Ryan, your response. Mayor Ryan. Mayor Ryan,
do not drink the water.
Mayor Ryan, we haven't heard what you said.
Absurd that their water. Let's go back to the history of what happened on Carter Road. The industry came in, and after they brought the concerns to the industry, Cabot Oil, and they did testing, and they said, do not drink your water. They bought in the water buffaloes. They said, do not bathe in this water, do not drink it, and this is there's so much behind the scenes. We all know how much oil and gas the big corporations control the thing. They've had a glossy Madison Ave advertising campaign that's cost hundreds of millions of dollars to convince us that this is a clean industry. It's just not.
I think Mayor Ryan,
and we're not dealing with arid areas like Texas and Utah and stuff where there's big gas fields. We're dealing with one of the pristine areas in the country where clean water is going to be dramatically affected. It's not the same animal here, and it's clear that we're guinea pigs for this industry. Range Resources
I think
just didn't know what they were doing in Pennsylvania back in 2003. Then they came up with this horizontal drilling, and we are right in the middle of an experiment. The people on Carter Road are friends of mine. I've seen their water, and I dare you to go and drink that water for any period of time. If it's so safe.
I've been on Carter Road, Mayor Ryan. I have been on Carter Road. Mayor Ryan,
we'll drink that water.
Mayor Ryan,
let's have a party and go see how and drink it.
I've been on Carter Road. I've offered to drink the water. You went to Carter Road and you offered the people of Dimmock clean water. They rejected you. The people of Dimmock know that there was always historically problems with their water, that the gas drilling brought nothing new. They demanded the EPA come in, and the EPA said the water is safe. I think you're confusing a lawsuit with scientific evidence. Because someone, in America, I understand, because someone says something in a lawsuit doesn't make it scientific evidence. And here's something that you may not realize. In America, there are a lot of bogus lawsuits. I know that's a shock. Look, you talk about stories from individual families. Sorry, stories from individual families is not scientific evidence. It's not a report. You wouldn't sell your house based on stories from individual families. You'd base it on statistical analysis of house prices in the area. Let's be scientific. Why are progressives? Yeah, but it seems that progressives here in America, there's a war on science, and it's coming from progressive left-wing sources because it doesn't. I don't know where this happened. I don't know.
Attention to some scientific evidence.
Kate Hudson.
Duke University study of methane migration into drinking water. It established through fingerprinting, scientific fingerprinting, that methane, certain types of methane, does come from the drilling. And they were able to identify where it was in Pennsylvania that groundwater was contaminated because of the drilling. And I think this is a complete red herring. I think this is a complete misrepresentation. I think the whole issue of focusing on whether or not fracking is contaminating groundwater is a way of diverting attention from where 90% of the environmental and health problems exist, and that is on the surface. And that is because of the poor way in which, both from a perspective of technology and from the perspective of the way in which the gas companies are conducting their drilling, poor construction, spills, leaking pits that have waste fracking fluids in them, the truck accidents, the dumping of waste frac fluids in streams and rivers in Pennsylvania, which was going on before the New York Times series occurred. This is where most of the problems lie. The release of noxious fumes from both the drilling, but also the compression, the transmission lines. We're looking at a 9% greenhouse gas emission rate in the study that we saw come out yesterday. These are where the problems are. We don't have to talk about this red herring, which they like to focus on.
Kate is a conservative. She doesn't like change. She said that. She doesn't like traffic. Listen, I don't like traffic either. Wouldn't like it outside my house if I wasn't used to it. I'm very interested, Kate, that you're saying we need to move away from contaminated water. That's because the evidence doesn't back up your allegations. You claimed for years. You claimed for years that it was contaminated water. No, you've said we need to move away from contaminated water.
But the debate over methane and whether the methane is naturally occurring or not naturally occurring is a way to focus away from where a lot of the problems are.
We have to break, but we're going to come back to this discussion. We're joined by Phelim McAleer. He is a filmmaker. Mayor Matt Ryan of Binghamton, New York, where there's a 2-year moratorium in place on fracking. We're joined by Dan Simmons in Washington, D.C., and Kate Hudson of Riverkeeper here in New York State. We'll be back in a minute. Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.